Hello, this is Niswander. This is NOWCast, the podcast of the 21st century. And I decided to start doing this as a blog. I've done some audio podcasts. It's been a while, but I decided it's time to start talking about all kinds of stuff. And as I got a music blog I started doing since I auditioned for America's Got Talent. And so every week I'm singing a song. So far, just one a week, whether it's original or a cover, and then broadcasting it on YouTube, on the Niswander YouTube channel. And I have been doing the Nowman Show, which is a cable access television show, actually produced in the studio and outside the studio here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area. I've been doing it for 5 years. For those that know that show, it's I've had a variety of guests on it, live bands, Richard Wolff, the economist, the Commons. I've had Trevor Lawrence played sax with Stevie Wonder and the Pointer Sisters, his band, his jazz group, members of Mandrill, Dave Bowie's piano man, Mike Garson. He's been on the show like 4 times. And I've had climate scientists and presidential candidates and done a lot of variety. Even had a variety show that I had a co-host and co-producer on. We had a live audience. So just all kinds of stuff. So I decided I want to do something in the vein of talking about even more of a variety and diversity of topics, and have guests come on and they can talk about what they want to too. Of course, within reason. Don't want to do anything that's offensive or just, inappropriate, but open up the topics more. And then what I have been with the media that I have been doing. So that's why I started the NOWCast originally as an audio thing, just to start, broadcasting some of my content from the TV show in audio format. But this is different. I want to open it up. I want to open up the topics. And so far I've been covering, topics that I would generalize as entertainment and education, whether it's performances or interviews, news and education, the arts. I want to open it up. What about talking about enlightenment or philosophy, or all of this in the context of current events or history, or just elaborating more on all of this? Made sense. So that's what I'm going to do in this introductory version of a vlog, NOWCast podcast, and just kind of go over the basics of what, as an example of the kinds of things I want to talk about. And of course, guests we all have our individual things that we'd like to talk about. Maybe in other formats or areas of our lives, we wouldn't have a platform or an opportunity to talk about certain things. For instance, philosophy, enlightenment, spirituality, or, if you're a DJ, maybe talk about being a DJ. It's an expanded view. Things that you might have in conversation, around dinner, or, when you get together with friends, and time away from your ordinary job or your work or the media spotlight or whatever it is. So I'm going to approach that from my own perspective. And of course I had to make some notes. So, and I want to be authentic with this. I mean, I just, the real deal. I want to talk about consciousness. I want to talk about the universe. Talk about things like spiritual or philosophical teachers, throughout my life. And spontaneous writings, sometimes I'll write spontaneous kind of philosophical things, and share that kind of stuff with you. Or I'll have communications with different people online and ask them different questions, such as Professor Richard Wolff, for instance. And have a really good question relevant to the times we live in, and he gave a very interesting answer that I could do a whole episode on, just that one topic of what's going on in our world right now. As a matter of fact, I want to start there because I haven't really talked about it too much. I have a little bit in my music blogs in the last month or so, the month of April 2020. But the crisis from the coronavirus, and it's a very complex subject. It's brought up a plethora of emotions in many of us, moods maybe, or thoughts that we haven't ever had, or just it's been a while, right, since we thought about certain things. It's a whole new experience. I mean, we're in uncharted territory, where we're asked to basically not go out a lot except for when we need things like food, basic necessities. Maybe you can take a walk, but do it with a face mask on, 6 feet of social distancing from other people if you come in contact with them. It's all very new to even older generations now. And some people think that it's over-exaggerated. Some people point out the science and what isn't understood about it, and the fact that it is uncharted territory, unknown territory going forward. So some people feel that certain parts of the economy should be opened back up or faster than what the experts so far are indicating should be done. And it's very confusing. It's very, who do you believe? In the age of fake news, there's a lot of questions. And I understand that. I understand the emotions. I understand, people feeling stir crazy after a while. And I'm recording this in April 21st, 2020. So it's been a while. It's been 3 weeks or something like that. So I empathize with all the emotions and the plethora of thoughts and feelings. I have to say, in my own analysis, in my own quiet time, contemplative time, but we really do need to save lives, obviously, as much as possible. And we also need to help the sick and help them get through it in the most comfortable, efficient ways. And that also includes the economics of it. I mean, a lot of people have been laid off. A lot of small businesses probably will not be coming back. We've seen the government give trillions of dollars to certain businesses, like they're deciding which businesses are going to survive and which businesses are not going to survive, essentially, which is, it's very, it seems very unfair at the very least, if not illegal, to operate that way. It just seems there's a lot of misplaced priorities, and it's just a mess. So I reached out to Richard Wolff on his birthday. If you don't know who that is, he's an economist. Well, he was based out of Manhattan. He's still somewhere in the state of New York. Many people have fled New York City because that's been the epicenter of the coronavirus thus far. He is a professor emeritus from the University of Massachusetts. He's also taught at the New School in New York City. He's written a lot of books. His most recent books are Understanding Marxism and Understanding Socialism. Occupy the Economy, I believe, is one of his books. He also has hosted a radio and television show, Economic Update. Still does that on a weekly basis. I bicycle that show into cable access here in Los Angeles every Saturday night. It broadcasts locally at 7 o'clock in the evening, right before my show, the Nowman Show, which is at 7:30. And then, of course, he's on YouTube too, if you want to check out his show, Economic Update. And then I interviewed him. I got quite a bit of content with Professor Wolff on my television show, including a 4-part of a lecture from 2014 that I was a cameraman on. And it's really interesting. It's like taking a very thought-provoking college class, or at least a lecture, a very interesting lecture on basically the history of capitalism and socialism and going forward with the solutions to the crises that really still from 2008 have not been resolved, and now we are in another one. Millions of people after 2008, they lost their homes, they lost savings, they lost retirement, and now we have another economic crisis because of a public health and safety crisis. So with that in mind, I reached out to him. I asked him, I said, what is the first doable economic priority right now? And his answer was to challenge the economic system as having failed in its basic tasks of securing public health and safety. And if you really think about that just that one sentence, that's a profound failure of our system to not be prepared for what should have been obvious especially to the experts, that we don't have a very good infrastructure in place. We don't even have a nationalized healthcare system that every other civilized country in the world has. Even places like Iran and North and South Korea, China, Russia, Israel, let alone Europe and Australia and Canada, and more, have a nationalized, single-payer, universal healthcare system where everybody gets covered, and they don't have to pay large amounts of money, if anything. United States, supposedly the richest country in the world, and we can't even get a public option technically. We have a very dysfunctional, highly inefficient, and very expensive, probably the most expensive healthcare system on the planet, and also the most inefficient overall, considering. And we still, even though 100 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt talked about a single administrative universal healthcare plan, 100 years later, we still don't have it. Bernie Sanders, the one who really advocated for it in the 2016 and 2020 elections, basically pushed out of the way. Not relevant candidate. The establishment doesn't want him. So we still don't have anything really practically in place, anything. Neither Republican or Democratic Party establishment has anything solid that anybody's moving forward on. Of course, now it's based on this crisis situation with the COVID-19, and you would think this would be the perfect time to implement something like a single payer Medicare for All healthcare system to simplify even just how it gets funded, let alone how it operates. And it's mind-boggling. So now we have this coronavirus crisis, controversial as it seems to be with some people, where an infrastructure was just not in place. And what we did have was rolled back by President Trump, and now he's scrambling with the Republican Party to organize with the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, to have some kind of infrastructure now that is going to be able to get even just the things like ventilators and face masks and gowns and gloves and these kinds of things, and more spaces open for hospital beds and things, and more doctors and nurses available. It's just mind-boggling how the preparation has been so poor. And this is nothing new. This has been happening for such a long period of time now that the experts at the very least knew that this is an issue that should have been addressed a long time ago. Having some kind of infrastructure in place, because people knew that pandemics could very easily happen, especially with what we've seen around the world in the last decade or so, with SARS and I think MERS, Ebola. Fortunately, these were able to be contained rather quickly, but this is something completely, this is, a strain of a type of virus that people are familiar with apparently, but I'm not a doctor or a medical professional, but it's still uncharted territory. They don't know, where this is going and how long it's going to take to get a vaccine, or to how long it's going to take to start opening up different parts of society, if that's even going to happen in 2020. And there's different views about that. Different states have around the country, and individuals. Some people are getting their information from mainstream media. Other people are, wanting to hear something more from actual medical professionals, researchers, doctors, and scientists, rather than just turning to some kind of media to voice an opinion about something. It's or a belief. It's just very weird times we live in right now. I guess that's one of the best words I can come up with. Weird, strange, but at the same time, we and I want to get into this really and make this the priority in what I talk about here in this first blog of the NOWCast podcast, is the hopefulness, the good that already is coming out of all this. I think we will see more and more of that as time goes on, but we might be in some rough patches for a while. It might be longer than we think. There might be relapses, and the numbers may drop and then go back up again. I mean, we don't know. We're in, like I mentioned, unknown, uncharted territory right now going forward. So what we need to do is be able to have conversations with each other. And I think more and more I'm seeing that. I've reached out to people I haven't talked to in quite a while, this past week or two. And people are reaching out to me in the same way. And I'm sure that more and more of this will happen. And it's good to to reconnect, because especially when we're so used to being busy or having these certain lives where we're just busy with different things, that even when we're home, we don't either have the time or give ourselves the time to do those kinds of things, to reach out to people that we haven't talked to in a while. And now there is some time to do that, or at least we're thinking about giving that more consideration and giving more time for that planning. That's what I've done. I planned to do that. So I knew that I would have some time, certain block of time, and I just went ahead and planned to do that. Made that a point to actually get that done, just like I would any other kind of project. And, and it's important to make media, and a lot of we musicians are singing from our spaces and putting the music out there on the internet for people. Like I said, I've been singing and playing, although I am going to need to do some things here with this equipment so it sounds better. But I at least got that process started, and I'll get it to sounding better as time goes on. And it's important. I think music is a very important thing. I think arts is very, very important. So to have some lighthearted conversation too, and just some fun music as well as some serious music, or music that makes you feel good. It's all, a way to sometimes take a break from the seriousness and that we feel constantly bombarded by in quarantine, lockdown, social distancing, wearing face masks, gloves, whatever it is that we have to do. It can be very stressful, so and intense. So we do need relief from that. And I think giving yourself some time to enjoy a movie that you like, or a TV show, or listen to some music, or if you're a musician, as many of us are, not only play, but take some of that practice time to actually share with people on the internet. So I may, right now, just one song a week, but who knows, I may end up doing more than that as time goes on. I do enjoy performing, and there's a lot in my own personal repertoire, let alone songs that I like. So yeah, that's, again, it's in motion, and it will always be a work in progress, and of course your feedback is always welcome. I'm always open to feedback. So feel free to share, feel free to make song requests, topics that you'd like to see, or guests that maybe you'd like me to reach out to, see if they come on and have a conversation. Maybe a panel. I've never tried to get more than one person on live stream before at the same time, so maybe I'll do that for a future NOWCast episode. There's a certain side of me that, when I was talking about the Nowman TV show, that does like variety, and that's why I had a variety show when I had a rock band called Niswander. This is the first album, by the way. It's Revolution of the Heart. That's the name of it. That's the back of it there. Yeah. Got a second album too, but it's called Adventures in Wonderland. I've noticed that I've seen more awareness of how maybe things have not been going all that well in our culture, in our society, the economics, our government, whatever that might be. And more people are getting a wake-up call to the problems that we haven't been addressing, dysfunctions that we haven't been addressing. And also, I see the frustration in that. realization, because I know from my own experience, the learning process sometimes is frustrating, can be painful, but when you get through it, it actually creates enlightenment and more possibilities for what can be done as alternatives. So I think a lot of people are having some psychological transitions going on in that awareness process. And so there can be moments of frustration for all of us, actually, or at least, of for me, what requires me to kind of quiet down thoughts that might be very, very active, and maybe, listen to some music, maybe go take a walk, which I used to like to go walk in nature. Maybe the parks that I usually go to probably aren't open, but at least I can take a walk in neighborhood or something like that, or another neighborhood, visit a friend if it can be done that way. So far, I don't think they're keeping people from commuting around. Because I would only do, what makes sense. I wouldn't be abusing that, and I certainly would use care in getting out around other people, even just a few people here and there. I see hope. I do see hope. I think I already see the good that's coming out of this, because I see more kindness too, people showing more concern, which should lead to more compassion in action. I think once more people are comfortable to some extent with the transitions, so that they can, expand on their activities. Because I know it's a transition period. I mean, the whole month of April really has been kind of a transition period for me in a lot of ways. Moving a lot of my life, or most of my life, here into this space, without going into detail about everything. Most of my life has to be in this space here, where I work. I also do my creativity, my various projects. Everything is, as far as all that goes, is pretty much in this room. So never a dull moment here. But I can see the time where, more of us are going to want to go out. We're used to maybe walking to a park, or going to the beach, or hanging out with friends, or going to a social kind of meetup, or being a part of a club of some kind, or doing activist work, or whatever the case might be. And we're not able to do a lot of that yet, or people are starting to be creative in some of the projects and things that they do. People are wearing masks where they'll be in contact with people, gloves and things like that. So I know the Poor People's Campaign in Los Angeles is every Saturday gives a lot of donated food away to people in the neighborhood there, which is very cool. And of course, I'm in the Los Angeles area. Sorry if you don't. When I say Koreatown, I'm talking about the Los Angeles area. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more good come out of all this. I know there will be. It just might take a while. It might take a while. So let's do our part to keep that time to a minimum realistically, and let the experts truly make the decisions, about how to navigate through this, with the economy and everything. And I will say, as far as the economy goes, the initial stimulus packages were primarily to trillions of dollars going to pretty much people at the top of the economic ladder. And then there was so many millions, or I don't know, maybe it's billions now, set aside for certain businesses that weren't mega corporations. So, but the mega corporations were basically taken care of first, selectively, of course. And then mid-sized companies were next, I think. So a lot of small businesses are just apparently it's just supposed to have to wait, and many of them, couldn't make their payrolls already, and they had to lay off employees. So who knows? Some of these companies may not come back, and they probably needed the financial assistance the most. So we've got to be thinking about that as well. I mean, because all the people that that were filing unemployment claims, record numbers, just in the month of April, record numbers in the history of unemployment offices all around the country, based on the layoffs. And I know here in Los Angeles that the unemployment website was down because so many people were trying to get on it at the same time to apply, because you can't go to offices, obviously, and fill out the forms and talk to a counselor. You have to actually do all the application process online now. So it at least for a while, it crashed their website. So who knows how many other places around the country something like that may have happened in some of the cities. I don't know what the final count was. Last I heard, it was like 10 million people total. I'm not sure. 10 million people filing unemployment. And economists have projected that the unemployment rate could be 30+% when it hits the peak. So I don't think we're at the peak yet. So we'll see. But I like the idea of if a person is unemployed, you get a really good employment check every week. And also, I think a UBI would be good too. A pilot program for temporary time. And make sure that you're comfortable. And you don't have to worry about getting your bills paid, because that's going to help the economy. And it's just kind of amazing to me that the government just doesn't have a clue about that. I don't know if it's, capitalists think that the government should do a minimal amount, even when there's a maximum need. I don't know. That's probably what it is, because that's what it's been in the past. And I don't see, old school, particularly capitalist minded people wanting to change that perspective, even though we're obviously in a crisis that's headed to the same low levels as the Depression of the 1930s, if something isn't addressed here pretty soon. Economists are projecting 30+% unemployment, which even exceeds the 25% maximum unemployment rate in the 1930s during the Great Depression. So this is not good in that sense. So I would have to say we need to grow a movement, again, based on economics. That's what was brilliant about Occupy Wall Street, is that it really did identify what was happening with the income and the wealth. Most of it, because of how the system is set up, the vast majority of it, I think something like at that time, 2011, 40% of it had been going to the top 1%, which really, that's a rounded off number. It's really more like the 0.01%, because most people, I don't think, are greedy, but all it takes is just a handful of very greedy people to create a huge imbalance in the economic system that can lead to, at the very least, a recession, if not a Great Depression, or which is where we could be going very easily. And economists have been predicting another downturn, but I don't. And medical experts could have predicted, coming pandemic, but everybody's human. I wouldn't say everybody dropped the ball, but there was a lot of dropping the ball, of not paying attention for a long time. And that tends to be how humans operate. They wait until there's a disaster, not just a crisis unfolding, but a disaster before they'll even address the crisis, whatever that might be. And I think this is a mindset that's got to change. We really do need, one of the solutions, I think, is as simple as a soundbite. We need people over profits. That needs to be a big, big priority. And why anybody would think that that's not an issue is mind-boggling. I mean, it's obvious it's an issue. It's obvious we saw that with the initial trillions of dollars in bailout money at the beginning of this economic crisis and pandemic. And there has been some stimulus money obviously put into the unemployment system so that people who lose their jobs will get a check every week for as long as coronavirus is in lockdown quarantine mode, where people really can't go to be in public places or too much, or be around people most of their day in public places. Who knows how long we're going to be in this phase. So there needs to be money there for people. I mean, and if you're unemployed, you should get even more. But I think everybody really is in a position right now, even if you're working, most people have had issues with the cost of living and their income not keeping up with that, or to the point where they're just barely getting by, and maybe they have to get a second job to actually get all the bills paid and barely get by. So there's a lot of people living like this. Probably, maybe as many as 80 to 90% of the population is relative to the standard of living or the cost of living is, low wage or part-time or temporary or little or no benefits and that kind of thing. So there needs to be some extra compensation there, even for people that are working those kinds of jobs. If you're unemployed, then you get unemployment in addition to that universal basic income. Or Andrew Yang called it the Freedom Fund. Freedom, what did he call that? He called it the, one of his cards here. Andrew Yang, I interviewed him. He was a presidential candidate, if you remember, and was on the debate stage several times. Freedom dividend, that's right, for $1,000 a month. And that's Andrew right there, if you don't know. Freedom Fund, or freedom dividend, I'm sorry, freedom dividend. Basically, it's a short-term universal basic income idea. He just kind of named it that because it resonated, the term freedom, it resonates with people, even though most people don't really know what that word means, it seems. But those are, to me, necessary steps, and even on a temporary basis, pilot basis. And I also am an advocate, if you've watched the Nowman Show, and I was talking about Professor Richard Wolff, who is the person I first learned about worker-owned co-ops. He's the person that I first learned that from, that they even existed, let alone what they are and how relevant they would be going forward. And especially now when we're seeing capitalism in crisis again, and there's probably going to have to be more stimulus bailouts, and hopefully the powers that be will see that those next stimulus packages need to be for the people, for the workers, so that they can get their bills paid. And that also will help the economy too, because they'll spend the money. It's no rocket science, it should be obvious. So why you wouldn't want to help the people that need the money the most and expedite that is mind-boggling. But then again, the United States doesn't have a common sense single-payer healthcare program like Medicare for All would be. Minimizing bureaucracy and paperwork. That's not to say it's a perfect system. I mean, even countries like Canada or France, Germany, Scandinavia countries, they don't have perfect single-payer healthcare systems. So they're still tweaking things, and there's still things that come up through the process that have to be addressed. But for the most part, you go to a doctor if you feel the need to, and it doesn't cost you anything. You don't get you don't have to think about a deductible. You don't have to think about a copay. No out-of-pocket expenses of any kind. Everything is covered. Why people in this country, in the United States here, do not want so? Well, actually, that's not true. 60%, I think there's 60-some%, I think, of Republicans, conservatives favor some kind of a single-payer Medicare for All program. And 80 to 90, I think it is, of the registered Democrats do. But somehow, if you look at the establishment, they don't want it. So they're going against where the majority of people are, and what just that one issue alone, the majority of people would rather have a single-payer Medicare for All type of healthcare plan than one that is a public-private partnership with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of third-party paperwork, and I know how inefficient, at the very least, how slow that process moves, because it has all these different moving parts, instead of having a one place that administrates it. It organizes from one place instead of having different companies involved. You have this private hospital or that private medical company that are involved in the process with insurance companies. It's mind-boggling that anybody would think that that's the most efficient, best system that we can come up with. That will have to change. So that might be one of the things that's going to be a factor here going forward from 2020 and onward. And obviously, everything's on hold. This is another thing that's kind of bizarre to people. I mean, there's some people that have concerts scheduled for into the late summer and the fall. There's others. There's the other events and concerts that are just, people are holding off and just saying, well, let's just wait and see, next year, just do it next year, next summer instead of this summer or whatever. Major League Baseball, in the NBA, basketball, those seasons are suspended. Looks like the Olympics are going to be canceled to next year. So I think they're in Japan, or they were scheduled to be in Japan this year, the Summer Olympics, I think. And then just all kinds of events. People are starting to do things online more. I'm seeing organizing different things like movie watching and digital live stream meetings. And even in independent media, as well as mainstream media, people are using live streams like this to do their interviews, because people obviously are in their homes. And I'll probably be doing that more myself. Actually, I tried out that format, or that technological format, I should say, in 2018 with George Carlin's daughter, Kelly Carlin, and then also a Yellow Vest organizer from France, Roman Light. And so I've done two. I did two like that in 2018, and just haven't had time to do more interviews like that. But going forward, I probably will do some here in the not too distant future. So, and then this podcast too, bringing other people in to have conversation and talk about random topics and what's on people's minds, and just like I'm doing right now. And yeah, there's a lot of different things that we media people can do. And as far as you, use your creativity. I'm sure there's something there that you can do in your quarantine space or spaces that would give you some personal satisfaction, as a creative outlet or something like that. And of course, just relaxing and enjoying yourself too. I mean, I watched a movie the other night, and of course, I'm playing music or making media. I do enjoy making media, even though video editing is, it's fun. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I do enjoy it, especially when I get an edit finished and look at the work, and I'm very happy with it. And I appreciate when others, do great work, and it informs me and educates me and entertains me. So thank you for all the wonderful video editors out there and people with creative ideas. It's always great to see what everyone's doing, whether you're famous or not. It's interesting. As you can see, MySpace, I'm working. I've always got projects and things going on here. Never a dull moment. So I suppose we should take this time to mention my social media. My very first YouTube channel is the Niswander channel. And I opened it in 2006. And so you'll see some new stuff populating there now, starting with these new weekly music blogs that I'm doing. So I have my fifth one. At the time I'm recording this, my fifth one is broadcasting this week. And I'm just going to keep going. And who knows, maybe as a work in progress, maybe there are some weeks I'll want to do more than one song and just do them at different times. And then they'll always be posted on YouTube. And of course, my TV show and is called The Nowman Show. There's 2 YouTube channels there. The Nowman Show on the Arroyo Channel, Arroyo. What the Arroyo Channel is basically cable access here in Los Angeles, Pasadena. And you can actually watch programming of community producers on, if you have an AT&T Uverse and also a Spectrum, I believe it is. You can see the Nowman Show at different times each week. The Saturdays, 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. is the beginning of the broadcast week. So if I have a new episode there or a rerun, then you'll see that episode from time to time throughout the days, from Saturday through the following Friday, starting at 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. And so I have 2 different YouTube channels. One is for what broadcasts on the TV show on cable access. The other one is mostly kind of like a grassroots version. Some contact I even recorded from my phone and posted it. So it's a variety of different formats and content, just as I call it the grassroots version of the Nowman Show. So there's both, and you can link to both of them too on the YouTube. So in other words, the Nowman Show on the Arroyo Channel, if you look at the screen, you can click on the Nowman Show and go to the Nowman Show. And in the Nowman Show, you can click on, when you look at the screen, it'll say the Nowman Show on the Arroyo Channel. You can click on that. So they're connected in that way on YouTube. And then the Nowman Show is a combination of, the actual description of it is a cultural magazine variety show focusing on arts, entertainment, education, and news. And that's the tagline, I guess you could say. So the NOWCast tagline would be all of that and more, I guess. So, and I thought I'd start just with me in this first vlog version of the NOWCast podcast. And I do plan to have guests on, at least one, and maybe more, to have conversations about what's on people's minds. And maybe we'll have a general topic to start with, and then we'll just kind of go from there. It's all a work in progress still. Essentially, I want to talk a little bit about, before I finish to wrap this up here, I'll talk a little bit about my spiritual philosophical perspectives. I grew up as a preacher's kid, Christian, Protestant organization, faith, however you want to call that. And essentially, this guy named Jesus is pretty cool. I mean, I still like the, love your neighbor as yourself. That's powerful. That's powerful stuff. And it's really reality. I mean, it's kind of what I'm seeing more and more now with the COVID crisis going on. As I mentioned earlier, I am seeing a lot more kindness being shown to people, along with the frustration and the fear and the, the horror of some of it. I'm not going to deny that, but I'm also seeing the good coming out of it too. And I think that that's important to stay focused on as much as possible. And loving your neighbor as yourself, that's a big part of it right there. Where you actually show caring for others as being the top priority. And that should be the number one top priority, that we care for each other, that we have compassion for those in need. Because you never know when you're going to be the one in need, so it's always good to keep that in mind. Give back as much and however you can. And there's many, many different ways to give back when you know that you've been blessed. It doesn't have to be money. There's different ways of giving back. And I've been in a situation to do that. Still am. You can give love, you can give a kind thought. Of course, I miss giving hugs, and that's not really something we probably ought to be doing a lot of these days, but I do miss them. What can I say? But there's a lot of different ways to express that you care about someone, and particularly when there's a need, and if you can help address that, that's even better. Because sometimes, people find themselves in a rock and hard place. I certainly have been there before, where you just, you don't want to be dependent on anybody at all, but there's a period of time where you just need other people for one reason or another to be there for you. So I know that feeling. So never hesitate to entertain that idea that you never know when somebody might need you and you might need them. It's very normal to pay it forward. It's very normal to give back when you've been blessed. And even if what you've been blessed with is a lot of love, like I know I have, I want to give that love because I know I have an abundance of it. It's that kind of thing. So whatever it is you have an abundance of, or that you feel in your heart and soul, give it. Give it. It's very important. But I also am a holistic person, so I understand that there is a give and take that goes on. Never leave any of that out. In order to give, we also have to be able to receive and be okay with receiving. I've had to learn that in my life, for sure. Don't be afraid of receiving as well as giving, because it's all part of the cycle. It's all important. I had another teacher based out of Southern California, a spiritual teacher, and she came also from a religious background, but with Christian Science. So she combined a lot of content from the Bible with science, essentially. And it was in people would now call that probably some form of metaphysics. But there's a lot of teaching that I got out of books and lecture tapes that were recorded. The tapes were recorded from the 50s to the 70s, and the books were written at least since World War II until about the early 70s, I believe. And she was her name is Marie S. Watts, and at the time that I was studying her, it's not the kind of conversation that you'd have with the average person. Sometimes it's still not the type of conversation you'd have with the average person. But basically, she talked a lot about consciousness as something that we so-called human beings, even though she was saying that that's an illusion, that we actually are spiritual beings, and we're conscious, and we're consciousness itself. And there's certain things that just resonated with me, and still do resonate with me. For instance, this is a quote from her. She would say, when you're aware more who you are as an identity, spiritually speaking, that you exist, something like that. That's the most simple, fundamental way I can describe that. Once you are aware, some people like to use this word woke. That's not really that I'm talking about. It's this awareness of the fact that each of us are part of this holistic experience that even goes way beyond the earth experience. It's universal, and it's just that understanding that shows us there is something more, I guess, than this human experience and human ego. And I like her response is that, when you understand that, even though we are in this human experience, you can walk in the dream awake. I like that. So it's that kind of teaching, that helped me to quiet down all these busy thoughts going on in my head, and gave me some insight into other views that I really hadn't heard before, coming out of any organized religion. In other words, not debunking any organized religion per se, or I should say, not debunking any of the content, but finding ways to validate a lot of it, but just maybe wording it a different way so that it can be understood by people that want more explanation, right? Although something like love your neighbor as yourself is pretty profound. I mean, that really doesn't need, it shouldn't need further explanation. It should be common sense what that means. But maybe some people do need more to elaborate on that. I should never say never, right? But Maria Swatz. And I wrote this the other day, and I guess I liked the way it sounded. So hope isn't hopeless. Again, hope isn't hopeless or based on hopelessness. That being said, I don't want to hear banter of unrealistic optimism, let alone negative talk or spoiled whining. Let's intelligently and compassionately discuss what really does help others in need and solves problems. Together, everyone will have to make some sacrifices. Everyone. That includes the billionaires and the multimillionaires. I'd throw that in there. So many of us have been making sacrifices and will continue to do that. But there is a limit, and we do have to have a balance. We can't be only working to help others, because I think we have to include ourselves in that holistic mentality. We're part of the whole too, not just others. So it's all of us together. So don't leave yourself out of the equation. You're an important part of it too. And I think I had to learn that, believe it or not. And frankly, I think ego, you just need enough ego to get out of bed in the morning. I mean, it only goes so far in my book. I'm much more impressed when talented people are just very down to earth and genuine, and will admit that, you know. But so the priorities, I want to mention before I wrap this up, the priorities of this country really, now I think it's apparent. I mean, in addition to the fact that we do have the money to get housing for the homeless, let alone all the care that they need based on where they are in their lives, from mental health issues to economic issues, the money exists. We could also find people that would be trained in that profession, or that would go to school to train that profession, which is really why we need free education, because then if we need more doctors and nurses, we need more, let's say, technicians for the transition of, to solar and wind power, and what that equipment would require. The creation and the repairs and installations, all this kind of stuff. So we do need more teachers, better education to prepare the next generation for the workforce that's going to look a lot different than the one exists now, that exists now. So education's a big piece. We've got to pay attention to that. And free education is not beyond a possibility. There are ways to put a minimal tax on Wall Street speculation. I mean, I'm talking very, very small. And a lot of money could be raised in order to pay for those programs, so that a lot of kids could go to public schools, for no cost, or at the very, very, very least have a extraordinarily reduced price. It's ridiculous having, these student loans in 6-digit figures, or even 5-digit figures, for years and years and years, and just not being able to pay it off. It's ridiculous. And of course, there has to be jobs, so people can work. Or in the case of what's happening now, the people filing unemployment insurance, if it's not enough, then we should give them some more money in the meantime. And it can be, the freedom dividend, like Andrew Yang talked about. Universal basic income is a short-term pilot program. I mean, there's solutions are there. Just the money's got to be freed up. Next stimulus packages need to be for that kind of thing. And of course, Medicare For All, which is a single-payer program that doesn't have a lot of extra administrative costs, less bureaucracy. And it's not perfect, and it takes time to implement it because there's a lot there. But it could be done. It definitely could be done in the next 4 years. But the politicians don't seem to be interested in making that a priority issue, which is just crazy. It should have been a priority issue even before the coronavirus. I understand the coronavirus is kind of preoccupying the world right now, but prior to that, well, the Democratic Party was working on getting Bernie Sanders out of the way. They could have been working on this Medicare For All stuff to start building an infrastructure, at least having that part of it done, so that more people could get care. And of course, hiring more doctors and nurses, that requires encouraging more kids to go to schools to get these degrees, so that they can do this work for the next economy, the next system that's coming. Just very, very horrible, bad planning by what we're seeing now, and not just even the United States, but around the world. I mean, people got to get their act together. If they're going to be in charge, then they got to make sure that they understand on a much greater level what the needs are, and to be able to anticipate something. You don't have to anticipate everything, and you'll still make mistakes, but you could, I mean, this pandemic thing was anticipated, and they didn't do anything. It's very telling, you know. So, but I really don't want to get into electoral politics. I think it's much more important to have a movement, and of course, a movement based on, you know, economic and cultural transition, where we have more of a democracy in every way. Again, nothing is perfect, but we can definitely create a government process that's much more democratic than the one that we have now, including democratizing the workplace. I also know how ideas have been written and proposed for this. If you have the equivalency of a small business administration for worker-owned cooperatives, I think you'd see more and more worker-owned cooperatives start coming together. And it's one person, one vote as far as all the most important decisions. You know, what gets produced, how it gets produced, and where it gets produced. So you have the same vote as the CEO does. And then the process decides what the decision technically is based on what was proposed to the whole. It's brilliant. I mean, it's not that it's without problems. The Mondragon Cooperative Corporation was hit really hard by the 2008 economic downturn, and they had a factory that had 1,500 employees in it. They had to not lay off. They don't lay off. They have other companies within the cooperative corporation, or go back to school. The Mondragon had a university, so you could either learn a new trade at Mondragon University, or you could take some time off and decide, you know, take the equivalent of what we would call unemployment money and decide what you want to do next. Or if you're old enough, just retire and take your pension money that you would be entitled to. And this is a worker-owned corporation, or cooperative, as we like to call it, cooperative corporation. Mondragon is in the Basque region of Spain. And it truly is amazing, cooperatives on a larger scale. So they have at least 75,000 worker owners and at least 100 different companies, including a university, including an administrative services department, IT, and shops, and all kinds of factories. Yeah, it's a very successful business model, and I can see that becoming more popular in time around the world because it truly does encourage democracy in the whole process, concerning them making the most important decisions, as well as the less important decisions are actually made probably by lower management, let's say. But when it's an issue that involves where the company money goes, what they're going to invest in, how much the salaries are going to be, that has to be decided by the whole of the worker owners. One person, one vote, including the CEO. He gets that same one vote that you would. So it's a great concept, and I think we're going to see more and more of those as time goes on. Well, we will if I have anything to say about it, that's for sure. Well, I think it's probably time for me to wrap this up, but I wanted to go over some basic ideas of what I want to do with this vlog podcast called the NOWCast. So when I have guests on here, the same thing will apply to them. They'll be able, to bring up topics that they want to talk about, whatever that might be. Again, within reason, and we don't want to get censored and all this kind of stuff. We want to be respectful, do the right thing. But I think most people know what that means. I do. Some people don't. I get it. I think most people actually are not greedy also. But I do think it's there's a lot more, how should I say this in a nice way? I think there's a lot of people that just don't know certain things still. That and I think they're good people. They just don't understand maybe how other people live. So they're not the greatest communicator in the world. And that's an important factor too, being a really good communicator. But anyway, it is getting late. I think I'm going to wind down here. And this is Niswander. And stay tuned for more NOWCasts. The podcast, a podcast, I should say, for the 21st century and beyond, really. So we'll hopefully get into a lot more different topics as in the next episode. But that's a little bit of a rundown where I'm coming from and how I would approach the format or the talking points and how I would expand on it. So until next time, this is Niswander, aka Nowman. And always remember to stay present in the moment now.